Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Today's guest is Chris Woods. He is a director, producer, cinematographer, best known for American Holocaust, Chaos AD, and the Sleazebox series. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you here. How you doing?
Thanks for having me on the show.
Our pleasure.
Is there anything you want to plug or anything you're currently working on before we get started?
Always go to the sleazebox.com, and that's where you can, pick up DVDs and Blu-rays from our films. I'm actually launching a OnlyFans and Patreon page. They're currently up right now. But I'm still kind of building them. You can see behind the scenes pictures from any of our films from the past 8 years. I'm also kind of working on getting. Actually, OnlyFans has the original Sleazebox web series, has season 1 and 2. 3 will be up there shortly, and for OnlyFans, we're also going to, and probably on Patreon, we're going to have the Sleazebox girls, like a monthly, kind of like a Playboy Playmate type of thing, like every month, do like a centerfold starting in January. And hopefully get some movies up on there as well. I'm still new to that. I previously had a channel on Vimeo, but that was taken down, where you can buy and rent movies digitally for streaming. Just got kind of several projects in the mix. That's pretty much it. I mean, I got a couple other things, but I can get into that as we, talk during this interview.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, for a moment there, you're the first person I've ever heard talk about an OnlyFans that wasn't personal sexual related, but then you kind of went there anyway. So
yeah.
Now I see why you were going there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I'd like to clarify, while you were talking about that, I decided to check out Sleazebox. It's thesleazebox.com.
Yes, it's thesleazebox.com. Yeah.
Apparently, sleazebox.com is a record company.
A record, yeah.
Not what I was going to think it was.
I know, right? Like, I'm just randomly typing sleazebox.com in my browser, like, oh, this should be good. What if I got it wrong?
Whitehouse.gov.
Oh, yeah.
In this interview, actually, we're going to be focusing more on your interests as a horror fan more than your work, but of course, that'll probably bleed through in certain places. We'll be asking questions in 3 different sets, same questions 3 times, focusing on childhood, adulthood, teenage years, because coming at it from different directions like that sometimes triggers memories that you had forgotten. That said, it's not meant to be a therapy session, so if there's any questions you don't want to answer, just say, I'll pass on that one, and we can move on.
Pass.
So, starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Oh, wow. Well, probably the biggest movie that stuck out was The Shining.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Star Wars fan, Indiana Jones, those type of movies. I was big into sci-fi and adventure. So as a real little kid, horror movies are too scary to watch, but I do remember bits and pieces of The Shining as a kid. Poltergeist, those movies really scared me. And I also kind of was introduced to the Universal monsters as well, like Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, actually through watching Abbott Costello films, because I remember Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was a big movie. They used to show up in New York on WPIX. Every Sunday there was a Abbott Costello film, and that was one of the ones in the rotation. And there was other ones too. They faced the Mummy, and Boris Karloff was popped up here and there in their films. So that was kind of my, introduction as a little kid to horror movies.
Being afraid of horror in the early childhood is not uncommon. I'm sort of along the same lines.
Same.
Yeah.
I was going to say too, that's I don't know how. I think we've had a couple of guests so far that have said The Shining for an early childhood influence,
with good reason,
right? I don't know if I thought of it previously, but it just popped into my head. Like, it's interesting seeing that movie as a kid. Like, you see it as you're older, and you kind of identify with Jack, the older adult character. But watching it as around that same age as Danny, like, I wonder if you look at Danny as the protagonist while watching it. Like,
I agree with that. Yeah. And then Shining's still like one of my favorite films of all time. Still one of the scariest films. I kind of watch it once a year, at least, kind of revisit it.
It's a Christmas movie. It counts. There's snow.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of, I mean, real quick, other films that I saw as like a kid, maybe like a 10, 11, would that classify possibly as horror films would be like maybe like Gremlins.
Right.
Even though it's kind of more for kids, but still there's a lot of, Gremlins back then they were pretty vicious.
Yes.
And, Ghostbusters would be another one.
Right. When you first saw The Shining, were you, I think you said you were scared by it or fascinated? Like what was the emotional reaction?
Actually, the first time I heard about it, so my uncle, who at the time was like probably in his early 20s, he used to go see, a lot of horror films in the early 80s, like Friday the 13th and The Shining. And I remember him just kind of telling me about The Shining and Friday the 13th, like just bits and pieces about it. So I was kind of, scared and fascinated about the movie. And then finally it came on like regular TV. So like ABC or NBC or one of those. And I remember watching it. I probably was about 10 when I first finally saw it. And I was like, wow, this is like, and it was scary just, and they cut out all like the gory stuff and the violence, obviously. But so I didn't really get to see the full uncut version till I was like a teenager.
Which I'm sure was still interesting because even if you take that stuff out, the story is actually maybe weirder because you don't get all the background.
Yeah. And you still have the tone too, just the way Kubrick sets scenes up and the audio of the whole thing. I mean, it's creepy even without the gore.
Yeah,
it was still scary because they had the two twins girls. They freaked me out.
Of course,
I mean, this them flashing them like that kind of subliminal, clip in the beginning when Danny's like having his little like episode in the bathroom, and they show like that them like whoa, it's like. Just kind of pop out of nowhere. So it was still scary without, because they showed a lot of stuff on regular TV, and same thing with Poltergeist. I mean, I think Poltergeist I saw uncut when I was a kid because I think we had like Showtime or the Movie Channel or something growing up. And
how old were you when you saw that?
Probably 11. I'll say maybe 10 or 11. That freaked me out. I just remember the tree freaked me out because it was a big tree outside my window too. So it was like, and I think at the time we were building a in-ground pool too.
Oh, so, nice.
So that was like, okay.
Make sure you check the ground.
Yeah. So there was a lot of similarities that was going on in the movie that was happening at my house at the time as a kid. So.
And were you in Utica at the time?
Yes, it was.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've got Seminole Indians in Florida, but I was going to say possibly more likelihood of
Mohawk.
The Mohawk Valley.
Yeah,
there are definitely tribes up that way.
Yeah, my dad took me to see that in the theaters, and like I said, I think I might have been 8 or 9. No,
it's a fun family movie.
Yeah. I think the first horror movie I saw in a theater was Critters.
Nice.
And that was kind of even scary at the time. And like looking at back now, it's not like, but it's still a decent movie.
So going back to The Shining for a minute, you mentioned scared and fascinated. We briefly talked about the general uneasy setting that Kubrick had used. Was there anything else in particular that scared you about? We can talk about both the scared and the fascination, but what was it that scared you?
Well, the twin girls. Towards the end, like when he's going with the axe, and he's kind of hiding, and he's like especially when he kills Dick Holland, and when he's chasing Danny, especially through the maze and blizzard. So that was kind of freaky. Even at the end, that image of him frozen. It's little subtle things like the way Kubrick, after Jack's chasing Danny and Wendy's like walking around the hotel, and there's like they just kind of she turns around and the camera just zooms on like Dick Halloran's dead body, and then she turns around and screams, and then there's the guy where he's like got the blood on his between his head, and he's like, "Great party, isn't it?" And like that was kind of just freaky. Just these and like her going into that one room. There's all the skeletons and even like the part. And I remember when I first saw it on TV because they didn't show the full the full scene where she's going. Like when I first saw it, she's just going up the stairs and she looks, and all of a sudden the camera just zooms in on the like aristocrat old guy and the guy dressed up as a dog or a bear. So at TV, they just zoom in on that, and you're like, that was just creepy. But obviously, when you see the regular version, the guy's giving the guy the blow job and stuff, and then lifts his head up, and then they zoom in. Oh, and who can forget the old lady in the bathtub?
Oh yeah,
that was
the show there.
That was like that. Yeah. So all that stuff, but in the same way, all that same stuff was fascinating as, I watched and seeing like how Kubrick, the style of Kubrick, and, the camera angles, the music, the cinematography, the editing, everything in the film.
Yeah.
When you talked about the fascination, would you say that came later because it sounded more like you were talking about, the fascination with the art or the storytelling, the art of creating the movie, or do you think that the fascination was there from the beginning as well?
It was probably there from the beginning, but it was more so when I got, as a teenager, when I really was into horror films. And
okay, so it was there, but it grew.
Yes.
You mentioned the tree and the pool in Poltergeist. Anything else jump out at you as particularly scary in that one?
Guy peeling his face off.
Yes. That was. Yeah.
Can't forget the guy peeled his own face off. And I think that's it. A lot of people get scared of the scene with the clown, but that didn't really scare me. Yeah, I always found that one kind of goofy as well.
All right,
it's got long go gadget arms. Okay.
Looking back on it now, interesting. The whole movie was creepy, and then like just the last ending of it was it turned into a complete shit show. Like really elevated the level of oh fuck.
This is the finale. You got to crank it up,
Yeah.
Any other influences from childhood other than films, like literature or like any experiences where you're actually terrified in real life?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. You mentioned your uncle had gone to see these movies. Was your uncle a horror fan?
Yeah. At the time he was. At the time, but he also was big into Star Wars at the time. Actually, there are some other things that did scare me as a kid. Now thinking about it, haunted houses for Halloween. Nice. So I remember kind of like up in New York, like there was these mom and pop haunted houses. It's not like here where in Tampa where there's Hollow Screams or Screamageddon or even Halloween Horror Nights at Universal. There were these mom and pop haunted houses that would be up in the country where these farm people that had farms because they would sell the pumpkins. They would have haunted hay rides, which I love haunted hay rides. I miss those. But a lot of times they would make makeshift haunted houses. And I remember as a real little kid, it was probably like maybe 6 or 7 or something, going into a haunted house, and it was just like a barn, and I think I was with my mom going through, but it's just like people. It was like a simple haunted house, like people just jumping out. And I even remember like going through the haunted. I was like terrified. I was like crying and stuff, I think. And And I think they even like towards the end of the haunted house, like they wouldn't let you out of the haunted house. So like the people, like they kept like, there was people dressed up and trying to they were just standing there being like, rah, and that just freaked me out. And then finally they opened the door and I remember running out screaming. And
nice. What would a haunted hayride be?
Those are cool. Those, so
I don't think so. No.
I went on those mainly like when I was more a teenager, and that's when I like really was into horror films. And they had a lot. You just get on like a big wheelbarrow or whatever, like a big thing where you put a lot of people on a like I don't know what's called, but there's a bunch of hay.
It's like a big pallet truck, and it has hay bales on it, so you can sit on them, and you just ride around in the hay truck, and shit jumps out at you and things.
Yeah, so they would have a trail, and then like they would have a tractor attached to the big truck, big wagon or something, and they would make stops, and they would have someone dressed as Leatherface come out with a chainsaw and trying to chase the wagon and stuff. So, but those are really cool, and there's not a lot here in Tampa. The only thing came close was there's a place called Screamageddon, which is up in Dade City, which is in Pasco County, north of here. They had a haunted hayride, which was so badass. It was like, it was great. I'm surprised they replaced it with zombie paintball, which were like a school bus with the windows cut out, and you just shoot zombies with paintballs, and you got to pay extra for them. So it's lame.
Yeah.
But the rest of the place is really cool. But I wish they still had that haunted. Yeah, I only been on that haunted hayride like a couple years ago. They had it, and then they stopped.
I like the idea of the zombie paintball though, but maybe not in that setting, but more like actually in like a paintball arena, like an urban setting. Like that could be interesting. Mm-hmm. So was anybody else in your family a horror fan? Was it just your uncle?
Yeah, just him. And like I said, he wasn't like a huge horror fan. I think it was just because it was the 80s and that was he was young and that was the popular movies that played, because this was during the peak of the slasher films,
So the movies that you did see during your childhood, though, they didn't trigger any like phobias or anything like that? Nothing permanent?
Now I'm going back. It's like a therapy session. Going back. I don't know if you remember, like in the 70s, there was a lot of, they called them, I guess, Nature Gone Wild movies, or where they're all about, there were
like giant natural animals, like the giant crabs, giant frogs.
Yeah, so there was like, Stanley for snakes, and there was Day of the Animals, which was a bunch of, there was Hellhound from, or whatever, Devil Dog, Hellhound from Hell, or Hound from Hell. The movies that really scared me were movies about spiders. Like that really creeped me out. I remember seeing like Kiss of the Tarantula and Kingdom of Spiders, and it was like Tarantulas, the Deadly Cargo, and so those films like freaked me out. Like because I was then, so I like a fear of spiders and stuff. So from that,
fair. So you mentioned Halloween. I'm guessing you probably dressed up for Halloween. Any favorite costumes?
Oh yeah. I mainly dressed up as somebody from Star Wars. I had if you remember, the Ben Cooper line of Halloween costumes with the plastic mask with the rubber band and the jumpsuit, the plastic jumpsuit stuff. I mean, Ben Cooper's made anything from the famous monsters to.
We remember those costumes. You're the first person we've talked to that actually remembered the manufacturer's name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I'm a big fanboy, and I have a lot of friends that are fanboys. But yeah, Ben Coop, that's the brand. I dressed up as Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Chewbacca.
Oh my God, they have a Ming one.
Oh God,
they have Ming from
Flash Gordon.
Oh, from Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, thank you. Yes.
And least favorite costume?
Least favorite, maybe E.T. So.
Why was it your least favorite?
I don't know. I mean, I like E.T., but it was like he's not Darth Vader.
Right.
It's kind of lame by comparison.
Let's see. Any reoccurring dreams when you were a kid?
No, not that I know of. Not that I remember, I guess.
No wolves chasing you around the kitchen like Chris.
Maybe I had spiders. Do you remember spiders sometimes?
Yeah. All right, teenage years. You mentioned Critters. What else really impacted you in teenage years?
Okay, so this is when I think when I turned 13. That's when I got older. That's when I was like started getting more of a fascination with horror films, and I wanted to embrace them. I remember, like Critters was one. I think I saw Ghoulies on TV, but really, what I call it my gateway drug to horror films was the original Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
And I got a cool story for that. It was on Halloween night, 1987. Mm-hmm. So back in the 80s, I was 14 at the time. I kind of wanted to watch a horror film. It was Halloween. And I really wasn't really into horror films yet, but I was trying to get into horror. I was trying. So I don't know if you guys remember, on USA Network at the time, they had Night Flight. Mm-hmm. They also had Saturday Nightmares. They used to show a lot of cool old horror films. Okay. And on that Halloween, they had Night of the Living Dead. And I remember I didn't catch it at the very beginning. I caught it as Barbara's running from the Bill Heinzman, the cemetery zombie. And so I didn't even know what this was. I was just like, and I just started watching it, and it got me really intrigued throughout the whole movie. And even I was like shocked about the ending where, Ben gets killed, and I saw the hero, the protagonist, die. I'm like, I was like, what the hell? Wow. It's like, so that changed my life, that movie. That's when I was like, I need to see other movies like this. And that's where it started. That's where my addiction started with horror films. And I think that movie made me want to be a filmmaker. I think at that moment I didn't say I want to be a filmmaker, but it took maybe like a couple months after that. But then I, dived into I think I remember just renting a lot of horror films. Like I rented Psycho, and I rented The Shining, and then and all the Friday the 13th movies. And at the time, I think we were up to 6. So and Nightmare on Elm Street, because I also like Freddy, because I remember seeing, because at the time it was Nightmare 3, it was out, and
is that Dream Warriors?
The Dream Warriors, and getting caught up with those movies, and Halloween, and and then I started getting into like I saw Last House on the Left, I Spare in Your Grave, and and I used to watch a lot of movies on USA Network, because they used to show on Saturdays. They had Commander USA in the daytime, and he used to show a lot of like the Blind Dead movies, like Horror of the Zombies, and It's Alive. It was on there. And they had Saturday Night Nightmares. They showed a bunch of movies. I remember they showed Day of the Dead, and Night Flight had a bunch of, they used to show Dementia 13. I remember seeing that and really liking that movie. And then as you go into 88, and then I started collecting Fangoria magazine.
And as you do.
And then I, just watched everything, and then that's when I even started going to the movie theater and with my friends and seeing these horror films. So like the newer ones, like I think Child's Play came out that year, and that was the first. It wasn't the first rated R movie I saw in the theater, because I think Beverly Hills Cop was the first one. But I was with my family, but Child's Play was the first rated R movie I saw without an adult, and I was only 15. I was with my friend Craig, who was only 14. So we just we don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to let us in? And they did. Yeah, there was one theater that didn't give a shit. There was other theaters that did, and the way to get around that is you ask for a PG-13 movie, and then you just go into, because there's no one at the door, the door to the actual theater part. That's only in the main door. So you say you want to go see, I don't know, Look Who's Talking or something, and then we go see Friday the 13th, part 7.
Security was a bit lax.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say at very most of those guys just care if you have like a ticket for the right movie when you get in the door. After that, they're like, I don't fucking care. Did you stab somebody in the hallway? I make $5 an hour.
You paid, we're good.
Yeah, I remember seeing Poltergeist 3 in the theater too. Saw that one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that one was, but yeah, so I just dived right in and just wanted anything horror.
Yeah,
I'm curious, what do you know? Because you mentioned you watched Night of the Living Dead and then dove right into horror movies. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what it was that you picked up on that said, I want to watch horror movies?
I don't know. It was just something about the movie that fascinated me. It was just like, it was really well done. It was scary. It was something different that I ever seen at the time. I was like, this is really cool. I want to see more. And, and I wanted, I was educating myself. So I went, then I think right after that, another one of my favorite films is Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And I knew of the movie at the time, of course. And I'm like, I want to see this movie because this is a movie everyone's talking about, or it's a well-known horror film. So I wanted to see all the well-known horror films.
What did you like about Psycho?
The storytelling, the way the movie was done, the story, Norman Bates, just the music, the way it was put together, edited. It's a masterpiece. It's just, that's when I knew okay, I started being a filmmaker, because I was like, I noticed things that other people didn't notice, like how it was cut, how, where music comes in, and where, that stuff interests me.
Oh, like the lighting and the angles.
Yeah.
Very stark lighting in Hitchcock movies.
Yeah.
He's good at that.
Yeah. And I became a big Hitchcock fan after that as well, because I saw The Birds, and I saw a lot of other films going, like Frenzy, and his classic like Vertigo and Rear Window, North by Northwest.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, it definitely sounds like Night of the Living Dead was like the catalyst, and you just branched out everywhere from there. Every series to completion, every movie, every sequel.
Yeah, it was. Damn. It was. Like I said, I called it the gateway drug. Once I took that, I wanted to try everything.
I'm taking some notes here about some of the things that you were talking about. And for example, this, Night of the Living Dead, and you mentioned things that are different and scary, part of childhood development, particularly through that middle teens period, the first half of the teens, 13 and younger, kids really strongly identify with their parents. They want to be like their parents. And then towards teenage years, there's this battle of, I want to be part of something, but I also want to identify as different because I want to be my own person. Mm-hmm. And so that's one possible reason why I could see that you might be interested in these horror movies, especially if it's something that you feel or felt at the time not a lot of people were paying attention to, or was like this thing that you were discovering. But this is just me talking. You could tell me I'm completely wrong and that you don't identify with that at all.
No, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like one thing I remember, because Utica's kind of a place where it's a kind of a dreary, depressing. I mean, at the time it was, now it's really depressing there. But at the time, it was a little bit. It was the 80s, so it was a little bit more vibrant or something. But it still was a place. It's kind of like it's a place where you're born there, you're raised there, and you die there. You don't leave. And if you have some like big dreams, like if you want to, like, I want to be a filmmaker, or if I want to be I want to go to Hollywood, and they'll look at you like you're crazy. You can't. So I think that was like when I just wanted, like, this is what I want to do with my life, and your family looks at you like, I don't think that's going to happen because it seems too far fetched. Mm-hmm. Especially like, you want to make horror films, you want to make these crappy
Good
movies, luck. This is what you want to do. So you get that, and yeah, it's like, yeah, you do get that, like, because I was a nerd, so and if people that are not horror fans, they look at you like you're weird. Why do you like this stuff? It's about people killing people, and it's like, you're gonna grow up to be a serial killer or something, like, they don't, obviously, it's like they don't get it. Watching these films is almost like it's a thrill ride. It's like a safe thrill ride. It's like going on a roller coaster, and you're safe. And it's yeah, it's all entertainment, and with horror films, because with I like all movies, I like all genres, but with horror films, you always get something different. Like, an action film are always kind of the same. A comedy is always kind of the same. With a horror film, you have zombies, you have like a serial killer, you have a slasher, you have monsters, you have ghosts. So you have all this different types of subgenres throughout horror, which makes it interesting. And it's also, like, shock. It's like the shock value of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. Like, it, there's a couple of different angles. It's the shock value, plus it's the different thing. It's the
taboo. It's like
taboo, yeah. Maybe a little bit less than taboo. Just like the thing that's forbidden fruit, I guess.
Pushing boundaries.
A different term for it. Yeah.
Because I think as a kid, I was frightened of the horror films, but it's something like, ooh, what's you used to see a trailer, and you're like, I remember being like, yeah, you're kind of you're scared, but you're interested. You're like, but then, like, oh, that's too scary, I can't watch that. Mm-hmm. And then once you get older, you're like, well, I'm gonna watch it now. And then you watch it, you're like, damn, this is good.
Yeah, it's like, once you get older, you get a little bit more courage, so you get over that hump.
Yeah.
Of, I'm not supposed to watch this. This is scary. To just an almost instant mixture of, yes, this is scary and intriguing, and it's actually really fucking cool.
Yeah.
When you say, damn, it's good,
forever.
Could you explain what makes it good to you? I mean, other than looking at it from a fan, from a filmmaker's perspective?
Well, just like it's you're getting like the whole package, where you're getting the thrills, you're getting sometimes good acting, sometimes not. You're getting sometimes something surprising, something shocking, something, and then, also as a teenage boy, you get, naked women, and, you get some cool effects, and stuff. You get like, whoa, it's like, so you get a lot of cool stuff. Like, even remember seeing American Werewolf in London, like the transformation scene of Dave Daughton's character turning into a werewolf, like, or The Howling, like something like that. The story arcs and everything, the twists and turns. So, like, you get a lot that, I mean, it and I got that same thing with seeing Star Wars too, but it's a little bit different, because Star Wars is for all audiences. It's the hero versus the villain, and the hero wins and everything.
Wait, I got a food analogy for this. Sci-fi action is to cheeseburger as horror is to casserole.
Okay, sure. There you go.
I don't know if that's a good analogy. Depends on whether or not you like casserole. What kind of casserole are we talking?
Maybe a turkey dinner or Thanksgiving.
Although, actually, I guess it might be a fair analogy because that's part of the problem. Well, not really knowing what kind of casserole you're about to dig into. It could be awesome or it could be shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror films that was the case.
Green bean and possum. Is there another kind of casserole?
I'm never a fan of green bean casserole.
And possum.
And possum? Well, you did grow up in Pasco.
Yeah.
It's funny that you're bringing up the difference between this and sci-fi, because that is actually one of the questions that we end the interview on. We often try to find whatever the common thread is that somebody likes about horror, and then one of the last questions is, okay, but why horror? Because would it not be possible maybe to find those same things in other genres? And you're already alluding to the fact that no, there's something that you can't get in other genres that you get out of horror.
Right. Yeah. With a horror movie, I mean, most of the time the villain gets it at the end, but then there's always that twist where maybe he doesn't, maybe he comes back, maybe or if you're watching the whodunit, you're wondering, who's the killer, and especially even like in the 70s and 80s, a lot of movies followed a template where it's a formula where it's kind of it's the same but also different. Like there's the final girl, Jason gets it in the end, but he's not. He comes back for the sequel. And I think as like myself as a filmmaker making movies now, I try to make movies where maybe the final girl is actually the killer. Mm-hmm. So, which we've done that.
Not to give any spoilers,
but
won't say which movie that was.
Yeah, well, it's an old. It's been out for a while now, so. But yeah, but that's the cool thing about horror movies. There's almost like no rules.
And yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say too. That even with sci-fi, for example, you're usually limited to the laws of physics, but with horror, like particularly ones like the occult and supernatural horror, even the laws of physics are sometimes out the window.
Or outside the window, like window adjacent. Basically, it gives you the liberty of being able to do whatever you want because it kind of includes other genres. It includes sci-fi as a subgenre, includes occult as a subgenre. So yeah, all options are on the table.
So you mentioned having some friends that you went to see some movies with. Did you have a group of friends at this point that were all like horror fans, or was it just friends in general and you happened to go see some horror movies too?
It was like friends in general. We just happened to see horror film. I mean, I had one. My growing up, my best friend Craig. We were both like really into horror films. So other than my other friends were kind of like they liked it, but they weren't like they were into other things. Like so, but I think me and Craig were mainly into horror films. Now I was more, I wanted to like he didn't want to be a filmmaker, but I wanted to be a filmmaker.
So you went a little further than he did.
Yeah.
The movies that you saw in your teenage years did or did not introduce any new fears that you didn't have before?
No, because at that time, I was really into horror. I can watch a horror film anytime. I can watch it late at night and stuff. One thing, and this is maybe not as a teenager, but later on, I got fascinated by like real horror, like serial killers, like reading about like Ted Bundy or Charles Manson and like Gacy and Dahmer and the Night Stalker and stuff like that, and watching documentaries on that would freak me out because that's like this stuff really happened. So,
understandably.
And going back, I remember. I was probably 13. A movie that scared me was a made-for-TV movie. It was a miniseries. And if you guys remember this, it was called The Deliberate Stranger. And it was about Ted Bundy. and they had Mark Harmon playing Ted Bundy. And I remember watching that, and I remember getting freaked out about that.
Do you remember what it was?
Because that freaked me out about the movie. Probably because I knew it was real. It really happened. And I was like, whoa, this is not a fictional movie, and like, I was 13, so I knew, and they did it real creepy. I remember him, and they had this scene where he goes into the sorority house in Tallahassee, and he kills everyone with a baseball bat. And, and then reading, like later on in my life, reading on what he really, like, they just, that movie, they just hits him with a baseball bat and he leaves. And like, it's like, oh, he did more than that. Unfortunately, I mean, that does fascinate me about serial killers. I mean, it's not something like I don't, of course I don't endorse that. They're despicable people, and I'm glad all of them are dead. And they, but it's still that, I don't know, it's that fascination, like reading books about them or seeing all these documentaries. It's still fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a healthy separation of fictional entertainment horror and real life horror.
Yeah.
Was Halloween? Well, you kind of mentioned Halloween was you were still participating in it, and it was a big thing in terms of the hay rides.
Yeah, like different things I did, like Halloween, like versus a kid, then teenager, then adult.
There's a social element for some people. Having a strong social element really helps motivate them to want to be a part of something. So I was just curious, and that's one of the reasons that we go through things like Halloween. Did you have a favorite costume? Did you enjoy the act of dressing up? Did you have friends that you went out with? That kind of direction. And you had mentioned that you did enjoy the hay rides. I didn't know if so. Yeah. Was Halloween also like a big social thing for you in your teenage years?
Yeah, I mean, as you get older, like, as a kid, I trick or treated, and then as you get older, it's like you outgrow that, of course. So then, like, there wasn't really any party, like, so I'm too old to go trick or treating, and a couple times we would go to haunted houses, but then sometimes you feel like you're not too old for that, because you're never too old for haunted houses, but like the ones they had were more for kids. And so I remember, like, as a teenager, I remember just trying to find what to do on Halloween, because I remember, like, the haunted hay rides are still cool. Like, you can still do that as a teenager and not be like, oh, that's for kids. I remember, like, getting a little bit older, like in my college years, like going to Halloween parties. But I used to do, and I kind of still do, but I used to go to a convention that's around in Orlando called Spooky Empire. That was like kind of a tradition for me, because I had it around October, and that's another cool aspect of being a horror movie fan, is going to a horror convention, and especially around Halloween time. It's cool because, one, you get to meet celebrities there, and I knew a lot of people there, and it's also fun because that's another thing that, a misconception, I guess, of horror people that are horror movie fans, because people look at, if you're not a horror movie fan, they look at a horror movie fan like you're a weirdo, you're going to grow up to be a killer, this and that. But
quite the opposite.
Yeah, but it's total opposite, because when you meet other horror, like, that's like a horror convention. Like, that's almost like the equivalent to, like, I guess, going to Woodstock in the 60s, and
kind of, yeah,
because everyone is cool, and there's no, like, fights.
No fights. Everybody's having a good time. Yeah. There's liquor carts everywhere. Everyone's drinking. If you're so inclined, you can go to the bar and hang out with Kane Hodder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and everyone, because it's almost like we're all speaking the same language, and it's all like, if you're a horror movie fan, like, I know for myself, like, I was into, like, obscure horror films, like, as well as the mainstream, like Freddy Krueger and Jason and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, but I liked Herschel Gordon Lewis movies. I liked Luciano Fulci movies like Dario Argento, and all those Italian horror films and these B horror movies, and no one ever heard of them. And
yeah, you were ahead of the curve. That's what all the kids are into now.
It it wasn't until I was like almost 30 till I met other people that you also like Argento, so it's cool to go into a horror movie convention because everyone speaks the same language, everyone's into the and it's just a real cool atmosphere.
I think one of the difficulties of processing or understanding people who go to conventions, not just horror, but any conventions. I'll use myself as an example. Probably the only real convention that I'd really be a fan of going to is our music conventions or music, like you mentioned, Woodstock. And convention is not even the right word, maybe festival. Because I'm a musician. I enjoy music. I love going to listen to good music. But aside from that, like, I don't really like anything else enough to go to a convention for it. Like, I've joined Chris at Spooky Empire in Tampa. It was fun, but I probably wouldn't have gone there if not for the social aspect of going there with friends. Same is true with sci-fi. And so I could see how it's not, it's more on the observer, if you will, from speaking as somebody from mainstream society, that it's their own probable bias that they're just not interested in whatever it is enough to go to a convention on that. So they can't understand why someone else would.
Yeah, I guess you have to have a small amount of interest in something before going to a convention about it. So
I think it's more than a small amount scale, because I think it's a moderate to large amount. Like and maybe this has also something to do with introvert versus extrovert type thing too, because even though I love music, I remember going to, oh crap, what was the thing that 98 Rock did in Lutz?
Livestock.
Thank you, Livestock. I went to a couple of those, again, more because of the social element, but also because of music. But other than that, I haven't really gone to any festivals, but that's probably just because I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. But anyway. Did you have any reoccurring dreams in your teenage years?
No, I mean, they only not like nightmares, but I would, since I started coming up, I started writing my own stories and stuff, horror stories. So sometimes I would come up with movie ideas in my dreams.
That's cool. Like, do you have a pad next to your bed, and just if you read a really crazy dream?
They would, yeah.
Was there ever a time that you were actually terrified of something as a teen in real life?
No, I don't think so. No.
Invincible.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're a teenager, you're.
So you'd already mentioned some of the different things that you were getting to in your adult years in terms of Dario Argento and Lucci and stuff like that, which is sort of a different flavor than what you talked about in your teenage years. So to summarize the teenage years, do you see any common threads in what you liked in horror in your teenage years?
Yeah. So I kind of, slasher movies and zombies, I say those were my favorite at the teenage years.
Any particular reason that you enjoyed those more than the others?
For zombies was because of Night of the Living Dead. That was one of the main reason.
Okay.
And the slasher films because there was just so many of them, and right after watching Night of the Living Dead, I saw Psycho, which is kind of a slasher film, but not really. But it's one of the films that created this slasher, gave birth to the slasher film.
Right.
It's got a slasher scene near the end.
Yeah. Although I say Blood Feast. Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood Feast is the very first slasher film, but because it has more of the slasher elements in it. But anyways, yeah. So, but I watched all like Friday the 13th movies and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So it was all that.
There were quite a few options of slasher films in that area.
And then I saw like also Prom Night and Terror Train and there was like a sleepaway camp.
Prowler.
Yeah.
Quick question to Chris: what scene are you thinking of in Psycho that was slasher at the end? I was thinking the beginning, the shower scene. I thought that was the beginning.
Well, the shower scene. That was at the end, wasn't it?
That's or the beginning.
Yeah. Because that was one of the shocking things about that movie was that she was thought of as the protagonist, and to have her killed off early in the movie was part of the shock to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure it wasn't.
Well, there is. I'll say this: at the end, it has the scene where they reveal the corpse of the mother, and
right, and that's I remember that, but I was just asking Chris because I thought maybe there was some other scene that I had forgotten.
You got me.
Okay.
I've never seen Psycho.
What?
Nothing. Moving on.
Are you pulling my chain? Are you being serious?
I think serious. I don't remember ever actually watching it. I've seen clips and scenes here and there, but
you never seen Psycho?
Never sat down beginning to
end. He has said in the past that he has missed a lot of the quote unquote classics. He's more of a. I guess when did you start chronologically? Time speaking, like 90s.
With interest in horror movies, 80s, 90s, like with the the
Chris's exposure slasher is very wide to things from that, like I guess you could say that period moving forward. But yeah, he's got some gaps in the back catalog.
Yeah.
Which is fair, whatever. But yeah, put that one on your list. That's a good one. So moving into adult years.
Yeah.
So far I've gotten written down serial killer documentaries, Dario Argento, Lucci. I guess I want to talk about, so in your teens even, there was a very, I guess you could say, narrow window where you were looking at horror movies from a fan perspective of, oh, this scares me, to then moving into the I want to approach this from a filmmaker's perspective. And they're two different things because they're both how can I say this? They're both relevant in terms of a person's development. There are things that I think very many people get into being fascinated by a particular thing, whether obviously in your case horror movie or filmmaking. And other people might be fascinated by computers or Yu-Gi-Oh cards or systems. But I'd like to try to focus on the stuff that scared you and things that you were a fan of on the emotional side, because I think that that's a better indicator of what it is that you really like about horror. Because when you talk about it from the filmmaker's perspective, that's more of a scientific thing almost of, dissecting it. So in that light, what are some of the things that really impacted you emotionally that you've been experienced to as an adult in horror?
I think a lot of like as I got into my 20s, I saw I got more into the European film market because you would have to send away for some of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the things I guess that stick out maybe emotionally there would be some things even going further. I would say two movies that stick out would be Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox. Okay. And I didn't see those movies until I was in my late or mid 30s. And seeing those movies, and I enjoy those films, but there's a lot. They're emotional on a lot of different levels. Okay, well, first let's talk about Holocaust. Because Holocaust is supposed to be one of those. It's supposed to be part of it's supposed to be it's real. It's it
was kind of the first found footage film.
It's called it's the first found footage movie. I mean, and not all of it is found footage, of course. Like it's and like they go into the jungle and they find the film of the documentary crew that was shooting the thing about the cannibal tribe, and they come back and they're going through the footage. But there's a lot of things in the movie that are kind of one they're killing real animals in it, which that's not cool.
Nah.
It's weird because Cannibal Holocaust I describe it as it's a beautiful movie, but it's also a terrifying, disturbing film.
What made it beautiful?
Well. The soundtrack.
The soundtrack. Oh my! Yeah, that amazing soundtrack, and especially the opening.
It really is. I mean, that's
yeah. And the cinematography in parts, so it has that, so that, and it's the way it's made. It's like looking at it, but then it has a lot of rough things in it, like
actual animal abuse, rape, and rape on top of the burned hut of an indigenous people that may or may not have the burned corpses of their family members in it.
So there's a lot of rough things, and there's like. For a guy, there's like a castration scene in it and stuff. So
I forgot about that.
It's not as graphic as the castration scene in Ferox.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there's those. So that was like a film you look at like, whoa, and I mean, I heard about that film back in the 80s when I was a teenager, but I just didn't get a chance to see them until that point. Those film, like same thing in Ferox. I mean, Ferox is a little that had an awesome soundtrack too, but it's not. I mean, it's still a serious film. It's not comical any way, shape, or form, but it's not. It's got a lot of unrealistic things where they cut off what's his face's dick, and then he's okay. They cauterize the wound, and then he's like walking around. Not like he's still their prisoner, but he's still like. Trying to escape and stuff, so it's like that stuff.
It's fine. Only itches a little.
But yeah. So those movies, kind of like as an adult, like seeing those kind of, they stuck out on a, I guess like emotional level where you see things like, whoa, this is kind of disturbing, but intriguing at the same time. I would also Devil's Rejects. That movie like felt like a 70s grindhouse film. Some other Rob Zombie films I'm not a fan of. I don't like his Halloween movies. But I really like Devil's Rejects. I thought there were a lot of emotion. Like there was a lot of this. Like I think the scene with Priscilla Barnes in there, like they're putting a gun to her like pussy and stuff, and like seeing that, and I remember seeing that movie when it came out in the theater, and that was like a mainstream horror film at the time. And they were, I don't know, they did a lot of cool things. And also, I think a cool thing that they did in the movie where the antagonist at the end become the protagonist, and the protagonist becomes the antagonist, which is I find interesting. Which another big thing. I'm a big I'm a big wrestling fan, so it's called like the double turn in wrestling, where a heel becomes the babyface and the babyface becomes the heel in a match and stuff. So they kind of did that in that movie. So emotionally, you're invested. Like you see like the Firefly family, they're despicable people. And you got Willem Forsythe played the sheriff in that movie, and he's like tracking him down. He's getting revenge on his brother that they killed in the first movie, but then at the end you feel for the fire, Sid Haig and Bill Moseley and Sherry Moon, and you're like hating William Forsythe and stuff. It's like whoa, it's like, but they're the bad guys. They're supposed to get it, but you're like rooting for them. And it's different because, like, obviously, like, the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, eventually towards the end, you're rooting for Freddy, you're rooting for Jason, because you don't care about the stupid teenager.
Yeah, they do a good job in those movies throughout the film, making you root for these stupid teenagers to get killed.
Yeah, but with Devil's Rejects, like they did a good job of making the villains hateable. But then at the end, you're actually rooting for them because you're, which is, and that it's a movie. It's they for some reason he pulled it off.
I think half of the credit there, if not more, can go to Forsythe's performance as the sheriff because he went hard on that villain character.
Yeah, yeah, he did. Yeah,
could take a tangent quickly into wrestling and. Just in case it winds up being related, but what is it? You said you were a big fan of wrestling. Any idea why you're a big fan of wrestling?
I was a fan of wrestling probably, first horror films, but then came wrestling because one of my other friends, Mark, he was a big wrestling fan. And just the spectacle of it, it's as we call it, it's a male soap opera.
Yes.
And and I still watch it today, even though it's not as good as it used to be. It's a male soap opera. It's a comic book come to life. You can go live and see it, and you see the good guys facing the bad guys, and you just the storytelling and even the athleticism. The moves the guys do in the ring, and the storytelling, the psychology, and it's funny because I meet a lot of horror fans that are also wrestling fans. There's so many. And it's kind of like the two genres, like with wrestling and horror, it's the same kind of thing. Like, people look at you funny when you say you watch that. So,
All right. No, that kind of falls in line with what you were saying about, the movies, being extreme and making you uncomfortable. Wrestling is extreme, maybe doesn't make you uncomfortable, but is still extreme in a different way.
Yeah.
It's funny that you said that about the male soap opera because I've been saying that for decades.
That's a common term.
Soap opera plus testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that it seems that were scaring you in your adult years are more now, and this is not unlike we have heard before. Now coming more towards things that based in reality.
Yeah.
Cannibal Holocaust, the affecting real animals, and I'm guessing you had already mentioned by teenage years you were able to watch this stuff without it triggering any new fears. I'm guessing that's also the case for your adult years. No new fears.
Yeah, because now, especially when you make horror films,
But all the fabricated special effects, makeup, anything, you just after doing it, you look at it like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
I know what that is.
And now that you're into filmmaking, I'm guessing you have more of a group of friends that you can share this with, not just Craig. There is more of a group.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, because now it's like I have friends that are also filmmakers as well that we all share the same thing, and I met so many, I used to even write for a website called crazefanboy.com back in the 2000s where all of us were fandoms of a lot of things, like sci-fi, horror movies, comic books, music, wrestling. But yeah, and especially with Facebook now, we meet so many people on Facebook. But yeah, now there's I have a lot more friends that we have a lot more the same things in common with horror films.
Have you had any reoccurring dreams as an adult, or any particularly scary dreams as an adult?
No, not really. I mean, same kind of things. Like I would come up with, if I'm thinking, a horror movie idea, I might, dream up some scenarios because my subconscious is, still working. But.
And nothing in real life that's actually terrified you?
No. Maybe seeing some bad movies.
Well, I mean, for some people, it could be things like, an actual death in the family, or almost losing somebody you care about, or.
No, I mean, I had deaths in the family, but I mean, not really anything traumatizing or.
It's a good thing.
No, and nothing ever happened, or either on sets or nothing nothing crazy or anything like that.
The next two questions I'm going to ask are not just related to horror; they're across any genre.
Okay.
The two questions are: what movie have you watched more times than any other, and which movie would you say is your favorite? And they may not be the same movie. That's why we're asking them as two separate questions.
I would say the most movie I've ever watched would be Star Wars.
Which one?
The first one, which is A New Hope to the younger folks out there.
No. We are about the same age. That was the first one, period.
It's the first one. A close second would be probably Night of the Living Dead. But and my favorite would be Star Wars of all time. Yeah.
Okay.
Any idea why that one would be your favorite?
Just because it's kind of the first movie. It's not the first movie I ever saw, but I was like 4 years old when it came out. But it was the first movie that I kind of remember. So I don't know, and like I said, I think that's the movie that planted that seed in me, where this is this magical world I want to be a part of, as far as like movie making. That's my favorite movie of all time, because it just like has a special place in me and my youth and
your development.
My development. And again, a close second would be Not Living Dead, because that's my favorite.
For the same reasons.
Yeah, right.
So we mentioned, common threads in your teenage years and how that may have changed into your adult years. What would you say is the common thread now, and what kinds of horror you like?
So I still kind of like the same type of movie.
Zombies.
Zombies are kind of, because I do like Walking Dead and I do still watch it, but that's kind of, they kind of run it to the ground. So are you kind of like,
so what's your favorite now?
Favorite like subgenre would be, I don't know, I still like slasher film.
Yeah.
I still like I like a good whodunit slasher. Those are good, where you're trying to guess who the killer is. So,
as far as emotions go, usually our last question is: there could be any other number of things that trigger the emotions that you've talked about. Why horror? It seems like for you, the summary would be: yes, there was it was extreme and weird, but I haven't heard you talk about any other than the spiders. You haven't talked about any particular phobia of any particular thing, or any joy of any particular thing either. So in your case, it just really seems like this was your opportunity to do something different, just because it was different, like we talked about earlier, as your way of saying, okay, this is how I'm going to self-identify as being me. Unless you can think of a piece of information we haven't talked about yet.
I don't know. You mean like why I picked horror, or why like?
So usually in a lot of the other interviews that we talk about, there are particular emotions that people express, either a fear of something or a desire to move towards something. But there's something in particular, like, for example, one of our guests had a fear of losing his eyes, and that was tied to lack of control. And he, because of the things that he experienced in his life, really felt like he needed control. And so for that, the question there is, okay, well, what, there are other things other than horror that could elicit these feelings of control. So why horror? But in your case, there doesn't, at least to me, seem to be any particular fear or desire other than just wanting to say, this is who am I choose to identify as. Unless you can think of an example that we haven't touched on.
No, I mean, I think to me, there's not any particular fear or something where like I need horror movies as like a therapy or something. It's more just like I said, when I saw Night of the Dead for the first time, I was just like, whoa, this is like different from a Star Wars movie or a typical, it's like, what else is horror gonna offer me? So I think diving into that, like I said, it's all, there's different, and it's just like, and also, it's a, like I said, it's a safe thrill, like if
actually, you know what? I'm glad that you said that, because that just reminded me of one other thing that you did say. We briefly talked about how Utica seemed, at least at the time, depressing and stifling, if you will. I could see that maybe being an emotional response of, I don't want to get stuck in this place. I want to, what's the word I'm looking for, violating these boundaries that have been placed on me.
Like, and the movies are always like an escape. So it's also like an escape to, like, if your life isn't that great, or where you're living that great, you can go watch a movie, and it takes you away from.
I don't even just mean it as the escape of being in the movie itself, but I mean in terms of filmmaking as a career, of being your way to get out of that city, literally the geographic area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I agree with.
They could definitely be a drive at that point.
Because it's something, especially at that time, where if you want to be a filmmaker, you either go to New York or Hollywood. So it definitely takes you out of where you were originally at. Yeah, I agree with that. It's something, but yeah, with horror movies, like, it's like I was saying before, it's like a roller coaster ride. It's a safe thrill, because, like, and there's people like that have different, like, thrills, like, some people, love to try to cheat death, or go as fast as they can in their car before crashing or something. But that's not me. More like, I'll watch a horror film to kind of, this is my, what am I gonna, like, because like I said, you don't know with certain horror films, you don't know what to expect. Like, there's certain movies that, you know what you're gonna get, and then those movies, like, they're, like, but some movies even today, like, you sit down and watch, like, what am I in, like, what am I, where's this gonna go?
I would say it's that. It's kind of like it's a safe thrill and adrenaline and just thrill. Really, it's like for instance, you saw Night of the Living Dead in adolescence or at a young age, and there's that initial thrill. However, you happen upon the movie, it's like, holy shit, there are people attacking people and they're eating people. It's exciting and dangerous and thrilling. From there, that just kind of becomes almost not really an addiction, but just an interest. You have one thrill of discovering horror, and from there, you keep wanting to go back to that thrill.
Well, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to piece this all together in my head, that it almost seems to me like the real desire that we've talked about, at least in this call, it seems to me like the bigger desire was to break those boundaries, maybe that you felt placed on you in Utica. And then the horror thing might almost be secondary, although a very close second, in that it was something that you enjoyed, and it allows you more creative freedom than maybe sci-fi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a horror movie, like for one, if you're a filmmaker, especially low budget, you're gonna gravitate to horror films, because that's like, and I think John Carpenter said it, where comedy you can't translate to another country sometimes.
It's cultural.
Because, American comedy is different from comedy in Europe, and so, but you don't have to translate fear.
Right.
Yeah. Also, with horror versus sci-fi, it's easier to make blood spurting out of somebody's neck than it is a model starship.
Well, it's hard to do well.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to do, because there are some
Red Dwarf
gems out there. Hey, You do not besmirch the name of Red Dwarf, sir.
I wasn't besmirching. I was saying that that's an example of one that, well, but I think that's more because it's the comedy that saves it. But, you can tell that it's low budget in terms of the sci-fi part of it.
You mean, is that a lampshade on the back of the shuttle in the intro to the show?
I have no idea. I'm just thinking of like the scene. I remember the scenes of like Holly, the hologram. Like I said, it was a way for you to identify yourself, and then the filmmaking aspect of it was part of your way to break some boundaries and get out of where you were. And it just so happened that it coincided very well with your enjoyment of horror. So
yeah,
you got lucky.
Definitely.
Although I have always liked to say luck is opportunity plus preparation. So
it's like a true gym teacher.
Yeah, well, if you're prepared but you don't have an opportunity, you're not going anywhere. If you've got the opportunity but you're not prepared, you're not going anywhere. Will, thank you very much for being our guest. We do appreciate the.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you guys for having me on the show.
And thank you to anybody out there listening. Again, please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. We'll have a schedule posted there to show who we're interviewing, as well as the people we'd like to interview. If you can help us connect with any of those people, or if you know someone you'd like to have added to the list, let us know. You can also become a Patreon subscriber. Link to our social media in general. Just come let us know how we're doing. horrormakesushappy.com.